Whenever I start talking to someone about EVs who's not familiar with them, invariably the first question I get is, how long does it take to charge? And I thought, since we've got this social distance time and can't really go anywhere, why don't we find that out definitively for my car? And I'm going to start with just the 110 outlet. I always tell people, if you charge this way, it's going to take days. Well, let's see what that actual time is. And then I'll time some subsequent charges with different methods. Level 2, what I usually charge with overnight, and then V2 Supercharging, and then V3. So here's the first test. This is my mobile connector that I use to charge at home, and it has different attachments. So this is the small baby, the 110. The newer vehicles have a different style where the adapter actually plugs into this unit, but in 2015 this was the unit they had. I'm at a very low state of charge now, only 7%, so I'm going to take that up maybe to 90-95% and see how long that takes. It's going to be a couple days, so let's get started. So this is our level 2 plug. Normally I'd be using this with the other adapter, but today I'm going to plug into this guy. So let's see how it does. It's about 12:50 in the afternoon. We just plugged in. The app is saying it's going to take 24 hours plus to charge. So I'll come back every few hours and check in and see how we're doing. Well, the sun certainly has come out in the last hour. It looks like we picked up about 3 miles of rated range. So we're off to a blazing start. Here's the stats from the dash. You can see the climate control is limited by the warning there. We're still well over 24 hours to charge. I'll check back in a few hours. We've been charging for 6 hours on 110, and we'll see if the app will refresh or if I have to get in the car. We are up to 39 miles, so up from 17 to 39 miles of rated range. So this definitely isn't your fastest option. It's now been 8 hours of charging on the 110 outlet, and I thought this is a good example of what would happen if you got somewhere at night or had to stop and thought, well, I'll just plug in and see where it is when I wake up in the morning. So if you could find some place and get yourself 8 hours of sleep, then this is how much range you'd get. So let's check that out. So you can see in 8 hours we made it up to 46 miles of rated range. We gained 29 miles. It's almost 1 a.m. We've been charging for 12 hours now on 110, and we're up to 61 miles of rated range. All right, well, it's Tuesday. We've now been charging for just over 24 hours, and let's see how it's doing. I'll bring the app up here, but we're up to 106 rated miles of range, so it's not quite 100 miles in a day. I think we started with 17 miles, and this is 106, so 90 miles in 24 hours. It's still chugging away on the 110 plug. Luckily, we don't have to go anywhere, and we can keep this experiment going as long as it takes. It's a beautiful night. I think we have a super moon tonight. I'll try to add some footage of that in. We are a day and a half in. It's just after 12:50 in the morning, and we've made it up to 150 miles of rated range. But we're still charging, and it says it has over 24 hours left. We've just passed the 48-hour mark, and finally our estimate is under 24 hours. Got 17 hours and 5 minutes on the phone app. Then when I opened the car it said 17 and a half hours. Still quite a ways to go, but we've got up to 193 miles of rated range. So it looks like early tomorrow morning when we're going to get to 100%. I'm not going to leave it at that state of charge. The second it hits 100% or close to it, I will take off and just drive it around just to wear some of that battery down, and I'm not hanging out at 100% too long. We're now at the 60-hour mark of 110 charging, and it's still saying it's about 9 hours and 45 minutes to go. It's actually tapering. We were getting about 4 miles an hour. Now it seems like we're getting about 2 miles an hour. This is a pretty full state of charge right now, and I don't know if I want to slow roll it all the way up to 100. I'm hoping that because it's a pretty low power level going in, it won't be damaging it. We'll see how we are in the morning. The snow came out of nowhere. 10 minutes ago it was sunny. I'm sorry this shot is going to be very bright. The light keeps changing here. Just before 9 o'clock this morning, I checked my phone and it said I had about 2 hours and 20 minutes or something like that to keep charging. And then was getting my daughter ready for school and just checked it one more time at about 9:12 and it said charge complete. So our total time charging on 110 was 68 hours, 25 minutes. So that is almost 3 days to charge on 110. We charged up to 249 rated miles of range from 17 miles. So that's 231 miles added in that time. So pretty interesting. If you're somewhere for a long weekend and don't need to drive anywhere on 110, you could get by just fine recharging on 110. And it's not going to get you out of a pinch in a hurry, but it can add some miles back till you can get to a faster charger or a faster plug. I switched it back over to percent, and it says it's charged up to 98%. So I don't leave the battery at this top level. I'm going to go drive around. Even though it's snowy, the roads are just wet. It does seem like from overnight last night till this morning, it did start tapering and didn't make it all the way to 100%. I don't know if it was just saying, that's it, you've had enough, we've gone this slow for this long, or if it's part of the battery management system resetting itself a little bit. So I'm going to do some other charging tests and compare it and see where we end up. Hello, it's almost 11:30 at night. I've run the car's battery down to 15 miles of rated range. That's about 6%. Again, down to a pretty low state of charge, about as low as you'd want to get, comfortably anyway. We're going to charge up to 100%, but this time we're going to do it on my 220 circuit, which is a NEMA 1450 outlet. So I've put that adapter back on the charging cable. This is the typical charge I would do in my home overnight. Normally not from this low of state of charge, and I normally wouldn't go up to 100%, but for the sake of this experiment, that's what we're going to do this time. I just plugged in, the car's making some happy noises, and right now it's giving me an estimate of about 8 hours and 5 minutes, charging at about 29 miles per hour. So we'll see how that pans out. So I imagine once we get past 90%, it's going to slow down again. So it might be saying 8 hours now, and then when we get to that last 5% or something, it might say 2 more hours, but we'll see how much it slows down, and I'll try to keep tabs on that. In most cases, for most people, this would be an easy charge overnight. If you're staying at a hotel with a destination charger or using a public level 2 charger, it's going to charge at about this rate. Some of the Hy-Vees and other places, municipal places, have chargers that go about this speed. So this will be a good barometer for what you can expect from that. I'll check back in an hour, and in the morning, maybe once or twice, depending on what we need. It's just past 12:30, so we're about an hour in on our 220 volt charging. And just like the estimate said, we've gone from 15 rated miles to 45, so about 30 per hour. Right now it's giving me an estimate of 7 hours and 20 minutes before it finishes. So that is, again, pretty consistent from what we were seeing an hour ago. Let's check back in the morning and see how we did. Good morning, we're all charged up. It is just after 8:30. The charging completed sometime between 8:20 and 8:30, so we'll call it 8:30. We got up to 252 miles of rated range. So that's adding 237 miles in a typical overnight charging scenario. On a typical night, I charge to about 80%, so this probably would have been finished a couple hours earlier. I think some of the destination chargers and home high power wall connectors get a little bit faster charge, but in this typical situation for me, we charged up at 9 hours. Welcome to 150 kilowatt supercharging. This is an older vehicle, so it doesn't take the full 150 kilowatts available from this charger. I think we topped out momentarily at 124, but now we are tapered off down to 87. We started charging at 10:30 p.m. and we were down to 10 miles of rated range. It's been about 7 minutes, and we are up from 10 miles to 43 miles. When I plugged in, our estimate was an hour and 15 minutes. I think it will probably take a little longer than that, because once we get up past 90%, it's going to slow down drastically, and say I have a half hour yet to wrap that up. So we're charging up, and we'll catch you later. We are 15 minutes in to our supercharging. It's 10:45, and we are at 82 miles of rated range. So we have gained 72 miles pretty quick. Can't complain about that. We are still getting 69 kilowatts, and our estimated time remaining is still 1 hour and 5 minutes. So you can see that isn't changing greatly. And I'll check back at the half hour mark. We passed the half hour mark, and we were at 131 miles of rated range at that point. So we had added 121 miles of rated range in just a half hour. Even though our battery is about 50% full now, we still have an estimate of 55 minutes remaining to charge. And again, that's because as we get to that higher charge level, we're down to 49 kilowatts coming in right now. So that starts to taper off, and from here it's going to taper off more significantly. And once we hit 90%, it's just going to dribble in there, because it's protecting the battery so you're not dumping tons of energy into a full battery. It's a good way to do it, but it does mean in most scenarios, as I've talked about before, you want to charge to just what you need or a little over and get on your way. So it's a big difference between gasoline and electric. Is gasoline, you fill till the handle pops in your hand and you go, oh, okay, it's full. Electric, you just get what you need and you get moving. It's a different mindset. You get used to it pretty quickly. We just passed the 45-minute mark, and we are up, I think we're up to 172 miles of range at that point. And so we've added 162 miles of rated range since we began. And that brings us up to about 67 or 68% of battery charge. Our estimate on our time is 45 minutes still. Like I said, this last chunk is going to take quite a while. At the 1 hour mark, we're at about 80%. We were at 203 miles of rated range. So just over 190 miles added in an hour. The time remaining still says 30 minutes, and you can probably hear the fans running in the background as the battery management system tries to keep everything cool as energy is dumping into the battery. But those sounds are pretty normal. Right now we're charging at 29 kilowatts, so it's really tapered down from the 124 we hit at our early peak. Again, this is just why generally people don't charge past this point, unless they really, really need to. We just hit the hour and a half mark on our 150 kilowatt supercharging. We are at about 238 miles of rated range, so almost added 230 miles in that time. But since 80%, it's tapered quite a bit, and now it's saying we've got 20 minutes left to charge. And our charge rate has dropped down to 9 kilowatts. So only putting in about what we would put in at a home charger per hour. So it is really slow at this point. All right, well, I think I'm about to call it. We are almost 2 hours and 15 minutes into our charge at a 150 kilowatt supercharger. And we are up to 249 miles of rated range, so we've gained 239 miles of rated range, but this last bit is just taking forever. We've tapered down now to 2 kilowatts, so we're only gaining at a rate of 7 miles per hour. Still says 5 minutes remaining. Yeah, according to the car, we're at 98%, and it is just trickling in. So, in the interest of my sanity, we're going to call it here and say that this is a full charge. No one in their right mind would have sat here for the last 45 minutes, and really we gained almost nothing by doing so. So That's why you don't want to fill up to 100% every charging stop, because it's just not efficient. It would be okay for overnights, but most of the time you want to get what you need and get out of here. That's it for this stop, and our next challenge will be V3. See if that's any different. We're now starting the charge at the 250 kilowatt Supercharger version 3. We're starting with a much lower state of charge at this one, with only 3 miles of rated range on the main dash and only 2 miles on the energy graph. So got it down real far this time. Didn't seem to, it may have spiked while I was still outside the car at around 120, 124, I think was what we got on the other version of the Superchargers. But it's tapered down a bit so far. We're already down to 90 kilowatts. Our estimate is an hour and 10 minutes remaining. We've already gained 31 miles in about 5 minutes. This, is also charging very quickly on the lower end here. So it'll be interesting to see how this compares to the other version of the Supercharger. Really, in this car, it shouldn't make a difference, or any significant difference, because this is older and limited in the total amount of kilowatts it can take at a time. But it is a slightly different setup, so it's worth checking out and seeing what the difference is. About 15 minutes in, and we've gained 75 miles of range. We started with 2, I believe around 76, 77 when we hit the 15-minute mark. We still have 1 hour and 5 minutes of remaining time left. The battery is about almost a third charged, but we've tapered down to 68 kilowatts. So I'm not sure if that's tapering faster than the 150 kilowatt charger, but it does seem to be still charging relatively fast. A half hour into the charge, and we gained 125 miles of range. We're nearing 50% state of charge, just in the time it took me to get the camera set up. Our estimated time remaining is 55 minutes, and we are tapered down to around 52 kilowatts. Still tapered down faster than I expected, but we'll see how this goes, and I'll keep you posted. 45 minutes in, and we've gained 165 miles of rated range, so we're doing pretty well. We've tapered down to 40 kilowatts, and what that translates into is roughly we're adding 139 miles per hour. Obviously, that won't stay that way for a full hour, so that changes, but it gives you an idea of the rate being dumped into the battery if it were to stay consistent at that rate. 45 minutes remaining is our estimate. And now we're into V3 Supercharging, and we are at 80% battery capacity. We've added 297 miles of range. We're currently just over 200 miles of rated range. Normally at this point I'd be leaving because this is more than enough to get to another charger or to get home, but the time remaining says 35 minutes, so we're going to give it some more time and see how it does. We've tapered down to 31 kilowatts, so that means we're charging at about 107 miles per hour. For those that don't know, the 150 kilowatt superchargers and the 250 kilowatt superchargers, the difference there is not just the speed, but the charge rate. The V3 chargers are the new 250 kilowatt capable chargers, and really only the Model 3 and Model Y can charge that fast at this point. They may be doing something to the newer Model S and Model X to take advantage of that, but so far that hasn't been announced or rolled out. Another defining thing about the version 3 250 kilowatt charging stations is that the pedestals aren't paired. So that means you can draw full power from each pedestal. On the 150 kilowatt version 2 chargers, they were paired, so it would be 1A, 1B, 2A, 2B, and those pairs would share a connection. You could only draw the max power if you were on one of the pairs alone. If someone pulled next to you, both of your charge rate would be cut down. Now, that worked out fine if someone was at a high state of charge and had already tapered and someone new showed up, but if people got there about the same time, then it just made everybody slow. So that's a nice fix they've rolled out for the version 3s, and that extra charging speed is going to help keep people on the road and get on the road faster. So at an hour and a half in, we are at 93%. We're up to 237 miles of range, and we have gained 234 miles. We are back down to very slow charging, down to getting in 10 kilowatts at 33 miles an hour, so that's only gaining a mile every 2 minutes, roughly. And it still says 20 minutes remaining, so this is where we are in that top part of the battery pack that just takes forever. I'll hang out for a little bit longer, but probably won't stick around till 100%, because this gives us a pretty good idea of comparison between the 4 different charging types. I just passed the 2-hour mark at the V3 Supercharger. We're at 97% state of charge. We're at 247 miles of rated range, so we've gained 244 miles. I'm going to call it here because we're down to charging 3 kilowatts, which is about adding 11 miles per hour, and it's incredibly slow at this point. Again, no one would have stayed for the last 45 minutes, but I wanted to see what this would be like for timing. I don't think I mentioned it the last one. Really, this charging beyond 93% for sure. When you're doing that, it's like in a gas car, you know, when you've got it pretty full, but you think you can squeeze a few more drops in there, so you click the handle a couple more times until, some spilled out. Charging to this higher rate at fast charger is kind of like that, where you're just you're getting very little bang for your buck as far as time goes. So most people wouldn't charge like this. I'll go back to the studio and draw some conclusions and show you the data on some charts, make it a little easier to follow. It turns out that V3 Supercharging is the fastest way to charge, even in my older vehicle. Now, the 150 kilowatt version 2 Supercharger is still going to be about the same in my car. But if you have a newer vehicle, or definitely a Model 3 or Model Y, you're really going to see a benefit from that version 3 supercharging. Level 2 will always be the better choice for charging overnight, allowing electricity to flow into the battery at a more moderate pace and maintaining a better overall health of the battery long term. The 110 outlet really is your gas can. It's there in case of emergency, or if you're out somewhere and just want to plug in and get whatever you can, well, you've got the time. Let's take a look at how these chargers compare to each other. First, we'll take a look at how they compare in their first 2 hours of charging. If you can see the faint green line, that's about 80% state of charge, about the longest I'd stay at a supercharger. And it's easy to see how the charge rate drops after that. Next, let's take a look at how all of these compare to each other time-wise, adjusting so that the longest 110 charge takes 10 seconds. This really illustrates why EV owners answer the "how long does it take to charge" question with "it depends." There can be a lot of variance, even with the same vehicle. Finally, I want to compare my fastest charge with a Model 3, charging at the same 250 kilowatt V3 Supercharger, to illustrate the speed that's out there now, and the advance in technology and infrastructure that just happened over the course of 4 years. A special thanks to Will Andrews from the Minnesota Tesla Club for sharing his charging data. You can see that in his charge of just 24 minutes, he added 219 miles of rated range. He didn't stay longer than that because, of course, he didn't need to. So things are getting better all the time, and your next EV will probably do as well or better. This is a long but interesting test, so thanks for sticking with me through it. Thanks for watching, and have a great day.